Yeah, so we're gonna mess with film look emulation. Is that what it's called? Film look creator, Davinci Resolve 19. I'm a colorist, so I've been poking around with it. I have some thoughts. Let's play with it and see how useful it is for creating film looks. Yeah, so here's my footage. Here's me. It's Blackmagic Pocket 4K, log film. I'm gonna go ahead and do a color space transform, just like I always do. And I'll explain why as I try to multitask and do some drop downs. So we're going to work inside the two goal posts. We can label these CST and CST. And yeah, so they have a color space transform kind of thing in Film Look Creator, but it's either buggy or I'm incompetent. It's a coin flip on who's really in trouble there, but I figured out that I'd rather just keep my two CST things the way they are anyway. So Rec 709 Gamma 2.4 is the out, because it always is. Yeah, so we're working inside of this. And you know what, let me add my window so I can grab my skin tone kind of stuff later if I want to. So there you go, there's me looking smarmy, and we'll just knock this down real quick. There you go. So there I am, and it's not way off, but it's a little off, the skin tone line. I'd probably leave that okay. So we're gonna work inside of it, and we're gonna grab the Film Look Creator, which is right here, and let's walk through it. So first row is default presets. We can do 65mm, 35mm, cinematic, which I guess adds bars, bleach bypass, which is a bleach bypass, nostalgic puts it in a square, default no effects, okay, clean slate, even more clean, and then custom, I don't know what the difference is. So sure, you could just throw this on and be good with it. I don't hate that. Is this better than a LUT to do that? I don't know. I think I'd probably rather just try LUTs out, but also if you click this 3D LUT compatible thing, there's all these other windows you can open up and they go away if you turn on 3D LUT compatible. For the sake of being shitty, I just think it's worth mentioning that anything you do in the node tree, you can click, you can grab a still, and you can send that as a LUT, export as an output or display LUT. Usually it's an output LUT. So just saying, we'll delete that so I don't get confused. So the idea that this is your LUT creator, the whole thing is a LUT creator, if that makes sense. So color space overrides, that's what the color space transform thing is. So I think there's a bug that when I put in, Pocket 4K, Gen 4.5, that kind of thing, output color, Rec 709, I think there's a bug where it doesn't work. That's the only reason I'm doing color space transform, other than I always do color space transform. So yeah, first one is color settings. So you have exposure, which I think is in stops. I think 1 means 1. I don't know actually. Let me hold on. I can test real quick. 1. So right touching 768. Okay, and then here 1. Yeah, so they're in stops. That's cool. Sure, so it's up to 5 stops either direction. Sure. I'll tell you right now though, I like to toggle on and off each adjustment, and I like each adjustment to have its own, node for that specific reason. And so the idea that all of this stuff, this is more like Adobe Lightroom or a photo editing adjustment where it's all together. I like them all being separate. That's my preference because I like to toggle them. So you can toggle the whole thing on and off just like this, but for the first few windows here, they're all stuck together. You can't separate exposure from contrast. You can't, unless you want to reset it, which is kind of annoying. So I'll just do 1. Contrast, again, and contrast seems to be the same as the one down here. I don't know how it's different. Highlights, effects, highlights, which there's not really any in the image here. Fade is the lower part of the image. There's other ways to do that. White balance, I prefer temp. I don't know why they didn't call it temp, but sure, you can call it, 2700, and I'm sure it's going to get bright orange, bright blue. I had it backwards. Sure, you know, again, I'd like it to be its own slider. Subtractive saturation is interesting because that implies that as you add some saturation into it, it's not going to make the image brighter, whereas, you know, this saturation down here would. So I appreciate that. I think that's a bonus. I wish that would be subtractive saturation. Richness, I'm not really sure I understand what that is. It might be the same as what I use as overlay. Bleach bypass is a bleach bypass. The manual way to do that is just do overlay and do like a black and white. So drop the saturation and then just control how much you're gonna do. Yeah, I don't know. So that's kind of weird that that's there, but that's fine. Split toning I think is really interesting. There's a manual way to split tone, and it's basically put a color in the lower image, okay, a color in the higher parts of the image. There's your split tone. The way they're doing it here is basically if you put your pivot all the way to the left and you put your amount all the way to the right, that's your main color. So orange, which is kind of skin tone-ish. It's in the skin tone world. Did I lose my scopes? There we go. It's more or less in the skin tone world. And then, so you can pivot around. So it's basically, the split tones are basically across from each other, which I think is an interesting choice. It's not, when you're doing like teal orange, which is kind of a very common one, that makes a lot of sense. But, so this one is teal orange, you know, any Michael Bay movie in the last 20 years. I feel like teal straw is a lot more common these days. You can't do that with this. So you can only split tone basically across the rainbow from itself, which makes a lot of sense in a lot of situations, but I like to be a little bit more precise than that. I guess that's my take on that. Cool that it's in there though, because if you're in a hurry, you can split tone real quick. Vignette, sure, but also, you know, you want to do a vignette, all you gotta do is go to this window, you know, stretch this out, flip it, there's your vignette. So, it's on, I put it on the wrong one, but you get what I'm saying. You can, let me get rid of this too. I did something else here too, yeah. So you can do a vignette, we can soften it, we can flip it, we can darken it. And there's your vignette. Is that better than just having a vignette here? I don't know. If you're already in here, sure, I think that's fine. I appreciate that you can toggle these on and off, unlike the ones up above. Halation, I don't know if this one even has much halation. It doesn't. That's an effect you can just grab from the effects library. When you're not in favorites. And it's a lot more intense in its version, so I don't know. Oh, I hate it. These close every so often. That's really annoying. Bloom, yeah, same as halation. Also, it's not really affecting my image much, but bloom, sure. Grain, there's like 4 ways to do film grain in Davinci Resolve if you paid for the license. I actually use a pay one, Film Convert, I believe. Isn't that what I do? Yeah, I use Film Convert's version of it, but there's also just grain in Davinci Resolve that you can use. So this, you gotta get it back. This is a version of what is the effect anyway. So sure. Flicker, same thing. It's got its own thing. Gate weave is really interesting because it's the experience of the image bouncing around in the camera's, you know, film gate. Sure. This I might actually use legitimately because to make that as an effect requires a bunch of keyframes, and that's really annoying. So I might use that the one time I use that effect. I'm not against that. Film gate basically just adds black bars the way you would in the early days of YouTube. Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I would if I was gonna, you know, do a widescreen aspect ratio or something, I would just, in my editing page in timeline settings, plug in the widescreen, you know, the way I would want to. Yeah, and then you can rescale the image to fill it or stretch it or whatever the hell. Anyway, I would do it that way instead of putting on black bars. YouTube, pretty much anything you do 1920, anything you want to, you know, dimensions wise, YouTube pretty much natively accepts now, so you don't need to do black bars. And so why you would do black bars, I'm really not sure. So and then global blend is what it is. It's part of everything that's in Davinci Resolve. But if you put on black bars, for instance, and you global blend, all of a sudden my shorts are visible. So I wouldn't call that a win. Yeah, so it's interesting. It's basically adding a bunch of sliders in the settings column that otherwise would be out in this huge gallery of tools. If you're coming from photo editing like Lightroom, or if you're coming from Adobe Premiere or Final Cut Pro, I think this is familiar and will be well received, will be easily received because it's sliders and that's useful. What I think Adobe Premiere has done, which Davinci Resolve didn't do, is you can turn off all these effects one by one with that little eyeball picture, whereas the whole point of Davinci Resolve having nodes is you can, if you have your node tree organized the way you like it, you know that this node is, they're usually labeled too, but you know that this node is this, and this node is this, and you can audition them that way. Yeah, if I need to make some kind of like tiny contrast adjustment, am I going to remember that 1250 is the default? I don't know. I do not know. So, split toning I think is useful, but there's, you know, manual ways to do it that I think are better. But just to do a quick and dirty one, sure. Vignette I think is a waste of time. Halation, okay. Bloom, maybe. Grain is not any better than the other grain way to do it, as is flicker. Gate weave I would 100% use because I don't know another way to do it here in Davinci Resolve currently. So I think there's probably one use case out of a million that I would use gate weave, but I'm glad it's in here because I can rock my image back and forth now without having to put in 1,000 keyframes. The film gate thing I don't find useful even a little bit. And then global blend is global blend. So if you're coming from Adobe Premiere and you're super intimidated by nodes, which I get, makes a lot of sense, and you're just not ready to deal with nodes, this I feel like can get you far. It doesn't have the minute detail adjustment that actual nodes do, especially when they're tools in the shape of what they should be instead of just sliders. But it'll get you pretty far, especially if you're comfortable with photo editing. My fear though is if I didn't ever do nodes and I just started doing this stuff, and then eventually I'd find my ceiling and have to start moving to nodes, the learning curve for doing nodes would be that much harder because I'm so used to how these things behave versus how these tools behave. I think that's really where I would be really frustrated trying to get to nodes. And the other thing is, most of these, for my purposes, because I'm a colorist, so I know a large proportion. I'm still very intimidated by the color warper, if I'm being honest, but the rest of these I know like the back of my hand, and I know what they do, and they're predictable, and it's just muscle memory at this point. So if I need to do something quick and dirty, as a working person like I am, I'm still faster doing it quick and dirty manually, but if I wasn't doing this quick and dirty, especially if you just want to drop on one of these core looks right here, I think that's perfectly fine. Is that better than dropping a LUT on? I'd say probably not, and here's why. Davinci Resolve has LUTs, and you can, if you have your favorite LUT, if you have your Rubicon LUT, you know, your teal orange LUT that you paid for, you put it in Davinci Resolve and you can drop it on, and you know, you can do whatever you want to it. If you need to key it down a little bit, if you need to make an adjustment underneath it to make it a little bit more workable with your material, you can do that. And that's actually like much of the time, especially if I'm not making a look completely from scratch, I'll either use the LUT the company gives me, like the show LUT, or I'll find a LUT that they really like, or they'll find a LUT that they really like, and I'll work underneath the LUT. You know, it's the same thing as the color space transform, kind of. So I'll put the LUT at the end, and then if I need to make adjustments, I'll make adjustments underneath the LUT. And as long as the footage, you know, somewhere in the pipeline in the middle is in something like Davinci Wide Gamut or something that has a huge color adjustability thing, and the footage is in, you know, 10-bit or better, even if the LUT is not a perfect LUT, I can really make something beautiful out of it. Whereas a Filmic creator, I feel like pretty much these presets are all you're gonna get. And so, whereas 5 years ago everybody was using the same 5 LUTs, assuming everybody adopts Davinci Resolve, I feel like all the cheap stuff and all the student films are gonna use the same 5 film looks. And that's fine, you know. If you're in a hurry, or if you're just not, if you don't have the budget, or if you don't have the time for color grading in whatever definition that means, you just want to drop something on that's not a LUT, I think this is totally fine, and your time is better spent elsewhere anyway. I honestly believe that. But short of that, if you're already on the color page, I don't know. Maybe it's the people I work with, or the workaround, versus a different type of filmmaker. But if you're already on the color page, you're probably going to want to make adjustments that you have a lot of control over. And I just feel like these Filmic creator choices are just, they don't give you enough adjustment to do the kind of stuff. And again, we can't toggle these on and off, which completely defeats the purpose of having them all have arbitrary numbers to begin with, honestly. So I don't know. I assume if you're already on this page that you're gonna want to do little tiny adjustments, and that's why nodes exist, honestly. So Filmic creator, is it something I would use? Honestly, I would use the gate weave, and I would use the split tone if I was in a real hurry and I just wanted to throw on a real quick and dirty teal orange, you know, look. I would do it. I would 100% do it. For everything else, there's other tools already natively in Davinci Resolve that I feel like do a better job, and it's in your best interest to learn the node workflow, even though it's really intimidating and looks absolutely crazy until you understand it. It's in your best interest to learn that, because then you can use the native tools the way they were designed. And my God, it's all second nature to me at this point. Like, having to go back to look at these sliders left to right, like, hurt my brain, because I was so used to all the adjustment and where things exist on the panel, like all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's cool. I think if you're starting out, Filmic creator, it could be very useful. Is it going to replace LUTs? No. Is it more useful than LUTs? I'm going to say no, because if you're on this page and you're putting a LUT on, you probably have the ability to go in and make an adjustment somewhere on here that would improve the quality of your image underneath the LUT without having to do it after the LUT and ruining the image. So there's that. Interesting. Honestly, I'm kind of blown away that Davinci Resolve is making these incredible changes. And specifically, they're not making changes by taking away stuff, they're adding stuff, because there was a period of time where they moved some scopes around and changed some stuff around, which really upset me. So I think this is cool. You know, building on the learning instead of taking away something everybody's learned and either adding to it or changing it in some way. I think this is fine. Those that are going to use this stuff are going to use it, and those are going to not. And that's cool, man. That's very cool. So I don't know. Do you guys like the Filmic creator? Are you just both hands in the muck like me, or are you you have the LUT, you know how the LUT works, you know how your camera treats the LUT, you know how to set up your camera for the LUT, and don't mess with a good thing, I can totally respect that too. So let me know. Like, share, subscribe. Catch you next time.